Welcome to Manna at the Tap, a podcast from Tapestry Ministries. Each episode reflects on a daily Bible reading from the Revised Common Lectionary. I'm Gloria, a fellow traveler on a spiritual journey with the Tapestry community, and we refer to the daily Bible reading as our spiritual manna. It nourishes our souls, fostering spiritual growth as we share insights and interpretations that enrich our spiritual lives. Today is Friday, July the 11th, 2025, the fourth week after Pentecost in the season of ordinary time. It is a time for us to live an extraordinary disciplined life as we experience spiritual growth. The lectionary reading is Genesis chapter 41, part of the ongoing story of a young man named Joseph. At 17 years old, his older brothers captured him and sold him into slavery because they hated him, and he was taken into Egypt. In Egypt, he was hired to manage the estate of a high ranking official, only to be accused by the man's wife of attempting to assault her. This resulted in Joseph being imprisoned, but it wasn't long before he was overseeing the inmates. While he was in prison, Joseph was able to interpret the dreams of two of Pharaoh's servants. One servant faced a negative outcome and was executed. The other received a positive result and was restored to his position. He promised to speak highly of Joseph. 2 years later, Joseph was still languishing in prison. Then Pharaoh began having troubling dreams, and his wise counselors couldn't interpret them. That's when Pharaoh's servant remembered that Joseph had interpreted his dream while he was in prison. Pharaoh sent for Joseph, who then provided the interpretation, giving credit to God for revealing Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh's dream was about an impending famine when the river Nile would dry up and the wind would burn the grain. The disaster would last for 7 years. But first, there would be an initial 7 years of abundance. Joseph suggested to Pharaoh that during those prosperous years, they should take a fifth of the harvest and store it as a reserve for the country in anticipation of the upcoming famine. This way, the country would avoid being devastated by the famine. Joseph also proposed that Pharaoh appoint a wise person filled with God's Spirit to oversee the collection of grain for the upcoming 7 years. The lectionary reading begins at Genesis chapter 41, verse 37, and continues through to verse 49. Joseph's proposal appeared to be a good idea to Pharaoh and his officials. He was the man they needed because God had given him the ability to interpret the dream. Joseph was now 30 years old when Pharaoh promoted him to second in command of Egypt, and he traveled throughout Egypt, gathering all the grain during the 7 years of abundant crops. He stored all the surplus as if it were the sand of the ocean. Joseph stopped keeping track. Egypt was the only country with grain when the famine finally arrived.